Well, g'day and welcome to the next episode of Next Steps for the Church. In this, we're talking about what does it mean for us to be the church that God is calling us towards. And we've taken this whole journey so far, looking at some of the underpinning things, looking at some of the values we want to get in place, and we're starting to talk about what are some of the practices, what are some of the ways we need to organise ourselves. Last week, we talked about being in groups of 2 or 3 and the importance of what one church calls apprenticeship prayer partners. And I referred you to some of the documents that you could access for that. Today I want to talk about a term that has double usage in the church, and that is the term of elder. What does that mean? Well, literally it means someone who is old. That's kind of what the Greek word means. But that comes to mean also leaders in the church. The term elder gets extrapolated out to mean those who are overseeing the church. Now, why would the early church designate its elders or its leaders as elders? Good question. One of the assumptions is that someone who has been following Jesus and done a few turns around the block, someone who's had a bit of experience, is possibly in a safer and more stable way, is less likely to be blown around than someone who is new to the faith or who is younger. Now that's a massive generalisation. Let's see if we can unpack the two and what do we need to think about in terms of the two. The first one is, I really do think that part of the church we want to be is a church where our senior citizens, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, or those who have, the 60-pluses amongst the church family, are not kind of put out to pasture, but that their collective wisdom becomes available for the whole church. And this is separate to any organisational structure of eldership. I think we need to find ways of recognising who our actual elders are. 1 Peter 5 says, in the same way, all of you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. All of you clothe yourselves with humility towards one another, because God opposes the proud but shows favour to the humble. It is clear that in the New Testament church, those who had a few years under their belt were in an intentional position of influence. And Peter is writing there to those who are younger and saying, look, it's more than respect your elders, it is submit to your elders. Trust that they know what they're doing, that there's some wisdom that they can impart to you. And I do think that part of the future of the church is finding ways to recognise and give appropriate influence to our 60-plus age group and bringing their wisdom into the heart of everything the church is about. So, and by the way, if you're 60-plus and you're feeling offended about me, aligning that age group with a senior citizen kind of thing, sorry about that. Just recognising that there is wisdom you might have that I think we need. And it's true right across the board. And I think actually those of us who have been around the block a bit and are on the journey and have got a few years under your belt, I think the church is desperate for people who are grounded and are able to input and mentor into the lives of people who are younger. We need spiritual elders. And so I don't know how it works, but I do know that we need to find ways of laying hands on and blessing our elders to bring their right influence. Now, let's now talk about the technical role of elders. You see, because in some churches, it can be a bit strange because sometimes you might have an 18-year-old elder, which is seems like a contradiction of terms, and it's not. It wouldn't be a usual thing, but many churches have a group of people who are kind of the peak board of governance, or depends how it works. Sometimes it's a deacons meeting, sometimes it's another thing, but it's the elders, and they are kind of those designated. Mostly they're those designated with the spiritual climate and leadership of the church. And here at Citywide, it's no different. There is a group of half a dozen or so elders, and together with the pastors, they make up the leadership team. But the elders are appointed. It's not really a political process, or at least it shouldn't be. It's a process of recognition of, okay, who are the people who need to be recognised as people we entrust our future to. In the book of Timothy, chapter 3, there is the term overseer given to this kind of role. And Timothy actually lays out a competency framework. He says, now the overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family and see that his children obey him with proper respect. If anyone doesn't know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation, interestingly enough, with outsiders. So what's that all about? Well, it's interesting that the Apostle Paul, in writing to Timothy, is saying the people we want to trust are people who have demonstrated their character. All of that is about character. It's about someone who is able to order their own existence so that they have enough emotional space and actual experience in the real world. And I think it's interesting that one of the characteristics is that they must be liked by people outside the church. They're people who know how to build bridges, people who know how to read what's going on, people who know how to care for the ups and downs of their own kids. And he is laying out a character framework. I don't think this is, again, it's not right rules, but it's when you're looking for those who are going to exercise leadership in the church, you want to look for people with character. And most scholars now agree that it's possible to interpret what Paul's saying there, both in terms of men and women. And there was very clearly female leaders of the church in the New Testament, as we see in both Priscilla and Aquila taking an equal kind of leadership role in the church in Corinth, and then later on that you'll see them turning up in other places as well. So it's not just men. I don't think that's what we're to take from this, but it is to do with character. And so it seems as though it's right for a church to set aside a small group of people who will take particular weight, and people who have had enough experience. That's why I'm not completely convinced about having an 18-year-old elder, because I don't know that an 18-year-old has had enough life experience in what Paul's reaching for here. But I do think it is right to have young people exercising leadership within the context of the church, and maybe even being part of meetings where they're bringing their expertise. But it has to be okay for young people to be young people and still working themselves out and working out where they're going. And certainly up until the point of age 25, 30, most people are still saying, okay, who am I? Where am I going? And that's got to be okay. It's important we don't put too much pressure on young people initially. But the two thrusts, if we're going to head to the future as a church, how do we recognise and not have a political process, but recognise the people that God has already got amongst us who are ready for that kind of weight of leadership and whose character can be trusted in the way that Paul's talking about. But then alongside that, And I think supporting that, how do we acknowledge and celebrate and release the gift of our over 60s, the people who have been around a bit and can bring mentoring and support to those of us who so desperately need it. So I think those two, we need our older elders and we need our church leadership elders, and often the groups may people may be in both camps or not, that's okay. But we need, for the future of the church, we desperately need that our senior citizens, our over 60s. I don't know if there's a politically correct way of saying all this, but if there is, it's beyond me. So sorry about that. But we need their gift. We need them to be inputting into the life of the church, be importing and mentoring into individuals' lives. So we need that. But we also really need to be recognising the place of eldership, as the Bible defines it, and recognising that part of the reason Paul specifically chose those words, I think, is he assumed that people who would be carrying the weight of responsibility in the church are people who had been around the block a few times and had been through some of the ups and downs, and would be mature enough to cope with the complexity of dealing with people. And that usually requires a few years under the belt. But I think by defining it in terms of character rather than years, I think he leaves it open for it to be not saying, okay, you have to be this old or whatever, but it's about those two things. So the church of the future, I think, is a church where there are recognised elders in leadership, and our elders, our real elders, are free to bring their gift to the rest of us. So I hope that's part of where we're wanting to head. We want to find ways to free our over 60 crowd to bring all that they can, but also to understand that they need to be moving into a phase where they are not having to carry the same weight that they did when they were 40, but to be seeing their role as mentoring in and bringing their gift that way. We need to find ways of doing that, and we need to find ways of releasing the leaders we need, people whose character will be the foundation on which the congregation can be laid. So that's just another thought on this continuing conversation of what kind of church do we want to be? What really are the next steps for the church?